On this episode of Sega Talk Podcast, we're peeling back the curtains on Sega's most pivotal year. The collapse of the Sega Saturn, the rise of the Dreamcast, and the moment gaming stood at the edge of a digital revolution. All this and more on Sega Talk.
Sega Bits presents Sega Talk, a podcast talking all things Sega! With your hosts, George and Barry.
Look, it's a giant talking egg. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the master here. So what?
Hello and welcome to Sega Talk. I'm your 90s host, George, and with me is did they have sidekicks in these TV shows or reality? Did they even have reality shows in 98? I'm trying to think of a big one. Yeah, I was going to say, did they do those music videos on MTV, TCL or whatever, when they counted down maybe? I don't know. Maybe it was the early 2000s.
TRL, Total Request Live.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe.
Today, if you saw the title, we're talking about Sega in 1998, which is kind of a interesting year to talk about Sega because it was between Sega Saturn and the Sega Dreamcast release. And what were they up to? 1998, by a lot of normal people, or at least online people, is considered one of the best years in gaming because it had such high prolific releases. One was even Sega's release, which we'll talk about. But it's mostly known as I would say the year of Zelda and Metal Gear Solid and maybe even Resident Evil 2s. And so we'll be talking about that. Also, why are we talking about Sega in 1998?
Oh, well, would you like to know? Well, this was a pick on our Patreon. Specifically, it's from our new picker wheel tier. So we have quite a few tiers, but the ones that truly dictate the direction of this show are of course, premier Patreon pickers who are at the front of the line. They tell us what to cover, and we salute and move it to the front of the line. However, we do have a tier below that where they throw out what they would like. We put it in a wheel. We spin that wheel. And, luck of the wheel, they might get picked. They might not. And this one is actually a Michael S. pick from the picker wheel. So that's the Patreon. That's the pick. And please support us on Patreon because we've stalled out. It hasn't gone up. It hasn't gone down, but it just kind of is what it is. And without your support, George goes hungry.
I'm hungry. Please feed me.
Yeah, he does.
Thankfully, we didn't record me eating that Chicago dog. It would have been like, is he really going hungry? He doesn't even enjoy the food, it looks like.
Oh, right.
So, 1998. What do you, when you think of the year 1998, usually recall to?
Yeah, for me, it was kind of an interesting year. I recall when I started high school. It might have been when I started high school. But yeah, it was definitely kind of a year before transition. I moved, I want to say maybe in 1998. So I was kind of more focused on that. It was kind of a big deal because I was, I think I graduated my freshman year, and then we moved, and then I started at a new high school an hour and a half south, which, kind of sucks because you make so many good friends in freshman year, and then you to up and move to a small town where everyone's already friends since kindergarten, and then you're the new kid coming in for the last 3 years of high school. It's yeah,
sounds
so
bad.
It sucked. And so that's what I was, I feel that's what I was focused on. However, I do remember I owned a Dreamcast before we moved. So you know what it was? It didn't happen yet, but I was I think I was starting high school That's what it was. And so now in retrospect, I feel kind of like down about 98 just because I enjoyed it so much and then it just kind of like disappeared and we moved. So yeah, I honestly, I don't have any strong memories of 1998. 1999, I actually have very good memories just with the Dreamcast and with the movies coming out, The Matrix, Star Wars Episode 1, like
Oh yeah.
all that stuff's great. And it also, we had the excitement of what the millennium would bring. This was well before we knew, what would happen in 2001. So it was just kind of like, you were just kind of like, what's it going to be like when we write 2000? That's wild. And so it was kind of like the last hurrah of the 90s. It was giving you a little taste of what the 2000s might be, which was a lot more internet based, a lot more connected. Yeah. So that's kind of the 1998 for me, kind of a year I was making a lot of friends, and little did I know I would be leaving a lot of them in a year. So bittersweet. How about you?
Yeah. Mostly for me was I think this was kind of like the time my parents. Well, I guess they never really told me what to do, but like I was felt like I was should be able to hang out with friends and I guess do whatever we usually would stay over there at one of my friends' house for most of the day and we would just play games, basically. I guess what kids would see Twitch streaming. So we would like be the whole block, like some of the people that lived in the same block to see somebody else play a game or something and then hang out basically. And that was the passive activity that happened in the background. So I got to see a lot of games, especially in this year because it was such a prolific year. So somebody had, I don't know, like I think Banjo-Kazooie came out that year. If somebody had a copy of it, they would go to the friend that we would all hang out with to his house and watch someone play it, and the kid that had whose game it was would just take it after the whole hangout was done. So it was pretty interesting. I enjoyed 1998. I didn't have to move. I've never had to do that. I think that sucks. Just even thinking about it, having to reestablish yourself. Outside of that, I think TV wise, well, like you made an image for this episode. If you're watching the video version, it has Nutty Professor. I would say, right? The space. Is that the one that blew up?
Oh yeah. What was that? That wasn't Deep Impact, was it? Was that Armageddon?
Oh yeah, Armageddon. It has the Backstreet Boys, so it kind of gives you a vibe of the era. And I think for some reason, some of the fashion choices are coming back. I've seen a lot of young people with clothing that reminds me of this era when I go to work. So yeah, I think it was pretty positive outside of Sega, which will actually go in here. And I do have an intro here, so it's 1998 was a year of a balanced on the edge of 2 centuries, the analog world still holding on and the digital one rushing in. It was a time of dial-up modems, Napster-era curiosity, and chunky CRT monitors glowing with AOL instant messenger windows. In theaters, Titanic was still sinking box office records. Saving Private Ryan redefined realism, and The Matrix is only months away from being bending pop culture forever. MTV was still playing music videos, and TRL and Spice Girls were defining a flashier, more global teen culture. In Japan, street fashion, cell phones, and arcades gave Tokyo an electric pulse, while in America, malls and blockbuster video remained social epic centers. I'll stop it there because it's not really worth reading the whole thing. It's pretty long. But that's saying, it was very interesting time period. Outside of that, did you have? I guess this was more in 1998, but did you have the whole Y2K anxiety because everybody in the TV news was like, it's gonna collapse, everything's gonna destroy?
I wasn't too bothered by it. I would hear the stories and read the news and be like, all right, I get the sense of what it's all about, but I honestly think it's a little overinflated, just knowing how computers work myself. And I feel too, there are a lot of news stories where they're like, well, we're already aware of it, so we're fixing the problem. so we're
Right.
going to be fine. It's 2 years away. And it really, but I think there was this kind of funny, I remember I did draw a comic book at the in '99 where it was like kind of like the Brave Little Toaster, but all the appliances came to life and started attacking people. Um, so yeah, I think I did find some humor to it, but I wasn't. I don't think I was scared. But yeah, it was a time when technology was really progressing very quickly. As we all know, technology kind of there's like a telescoping effect where like things start to really or a snowball effect too, where like you look at the 50s, okay, 60s, oh, 70s, whoa, 80s, 90s, like it really just picked up steam, and now we're in a very different era now, with AI, unfortunately or fortunately, and that's going to come to define, I think, this decade. But yeah, it is quite interesting to look back on 1998, and I feel like that's when we all started to really become aware of these things. You brought up global pop culture. You brought up these movies coming out that really pushed the envelope of special effects, between Titanic and The Matrix, Star Wars Episode 1 coming out. And I feel like Sega, meanwhile, was both at the forefront and behind the scenes, kind of falling behind.
Right. Right.
It was kind of their last gasp at innovation, and it was also kind of like you look forward and you're like, could Sega have really, if they did survive, like what could they have done? They can't. They aren't Xbox, or they aren't Microsoft. They aren't Sony. And so it was kind of like the last great true game maker making a console. So yeah, but I'm looking forward to jumping into this. Should we begin with January?
Yeah, we're gonna go a month by month. We'll talk about some games that are not Sega games and some that are. The first bit of news that we start the decade off is with Saturn sales having collapsed in the U.S. and Europe. Japanese management gets shooken up. Hayao Nakayama resigns as president, who's been there for, I don't know at this time, I don't know when he started, but his come over has been partly part of Sega's better years. So him stepping down or resigning is a big deal. He was still on the board of directors forever, so he still had some say, but he basically stepped down and gave all responsibility to, and he has the hardest name I've ever seen, Shoichiro Yarim I'm just gonna call him Shoichiro from now on if he comes up. But I think he did some recent interviews about the Dreamcast. I forgot what he said, but they're both alive, both presidents. Crazy. Some of these like Sega execs, you're like, they look old when you were a kid, and now we're old, and we're like, dang, what? You're still here? What's going on? But it's cool. I mean, I just saw a picture of Nakayama, and he still has the comb over, so I'm happy that he found a hairstyle that fits him. Outside of that, in arcades, the Model 3 hardware was still being a technical marvel, keeping Sega's coin-op division afloat, which, if you guys know, that's basically at this time still Sega's bread and butter. So a quote from Next Generation magazine, number 39, says, Sega, considering the pressure Sega faces from Sony and Nintendo, it's hard to see where the company can turn except forward. In competition, we actually have a Sony PlayStation dominating globally with the release of Resident Evil 2. They released in January 21st in North America, which cemented the PlayStation's mass market grip. Nintendo 64 still selling Mario and GoldenEye copies. I wouldn't know. It says right here younger audiences, but I wouldn't consider, Gold. I guess, kids did play it, so I mean. Yeah. Namco remains Sega's closest arcade rival with Tekken 3 still in theaters. What is your opinion on Resident Evil 2. Did you play it or even know about it when it during this time?
I was aware of the Resident Evil games. I wasn't playing them, though, just because I didn't own a PlayStation. I wasn't a big survival horror fan. But just in terms of what games looked like at the time, they were very chunky, blocky, blurry, and I feel as though they had much longer shelf lives than they do now. Like, I do recall people still playing GoldenEye into the late 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Which is why once we get to it, when the Dreamcast hits the scene, you're like, it was kind of just as big as when the Genesis came out, where you're like, this looks like real life, and I don't think video game graphics are ever going to get any better. You know, like that's what it felt like at the time. And it's so funny looking back now to be like, really? We thought that Shenmue was like peak video game, but that's where our minds were at the time.
I will say about Resident
Yeah.
Evil 2, there was like a big discrepancy between graphics and the CGI cutscenes, and I felt like the CGI cutscenes kind of sold the game on a lot of people outside of the actual. But the game was ultra violent. I'll give it that. Like at the time, I thought it felt like
Yes.
it was pretty gory. But yeah,
I remember at the time they really pushed CG cutscenes in commercials. I had a friend who was really into PlayStation 1 and Final Fantasy, and he was like up and down. Like, Final Fantasy 9 is the best game ever. It looks amazing. And I would watch the cutscenes. I'm like, yeah, this looks great. And then I'd watch the gameplay, and I'm like, this looks kind of ass. You know, like...
yeah. I know
or
what you
Final
mean.
Fantasy 7, like he was like, you gotta buy it, and I bought it, and I'm like, I never got past the first like hour. I didn't like it. It was so chunky and blocky. I'm sorry, but
I wasn't that big
that
into
was just
Final Fantasy
me.
7 either, and that it wasn't my preference. So yeah, Resident Evil 2 is considered one of the classic games, and I think it was like the best-selling Resident Evil 2 game until like maybe 4, and then again it's the best-selling Resident Evil game with the remake. So good on that franchise. In Japan,
I will
though,
say too, I just wanted to point out, I feel like at the beginning I talked about Sega being the last like true video game maker. I know Nintendo was around at the time. I feel like though Nintendo was not being the innovator that they were in the past and they are now, that they were at the time, I felt that Nintendo 64 was not truly all that innovative at the time, and GameCube had yet to come, and in hindsight, GameCube again was not all that innovative. I think it really was once they got to the Wii, they started to flex their muscle that they kind of lost from maybe the SNES era. So that's what I was getting at. Like you look at the Dreamcast out of the box, and it did so many things.
oh yeah.
But yeah, that was my point.
Let's move on to February 1998. This one is a big month for Sega's arcade division. We got the release of Sega Rally 2 in Japanese arcades for the Model 3. High-end visuals remind players why Sega still rules the racing genre. As for this game, it's not as popular as the original Sega Rally, at least in my point of view. I don't hear people talking about this as much. Maybe because it was during this transitional period where it didn't really get a proper, I guess, release. Isn't it? There was a Dreamcast one, right? But it wasn't even the best racing game on there.
Right, yeah, this era is very interesting because we're seeing a lot more happening in arcades than anywhere else. The Saturn's on the way out. The Dreamcast is yet to release. And so it's really the arcade showcasing what the Dreamcast will essentially be capable of, at least in the early releases. Like the Model 3 stuff is in no way the Naomi arcade hardware, but these are games that did get released to the Dreamcast. Sega Rally 2, Virtua Fighter 3 TB. I'm trying to think of what other Model 3 games made their way over, but it was an interesting era where the arcades were giving you a very early look at what was to come with the Dreamcast.
Yeah, I agree. And there's this next generation quote with Misaguchi, who is the director of the game. He says, "One nice touch will be the camera flashes coming from the stands. The better the player drives, the more flashing cameras they'll get." Which, I mean, as he created Space Channel 5, it makes sense.
Yeah.
You're a movie star. I do like when they add little things like that in Sega games when you're like, oh, okay, that, the little touches like that. Obviously now it's just obvious, but it was cool back then.
Yeah.
Another game that came out during this time in arcades to show you the difference in technology being released sometimes. Metal Slug 2 released in Japan with its 2D graphics that, in my opinion, are iconic now. I think this game looks amazing. I think this is one of those arcade games that you see when you're walking by and you're like, oh, I have to play. Look how beautiful it looks. But then when you actually play, you're like, this game is hard. I'm dying every single time.
Yeah.
Like, I can't get past the second mission. Maybe if you're lucky, the first mission, without putting a second quarter in. Were you a Metal Slug guy when you were younger? Did you play in the arcade?
I remember seeing it, and the graphics were just amazing. But yeah, it was probably one of those games I played for a minute and died and didn't return to. But I did replay a bit of the Metal Slug games for the Neo Geo Pocket Color. And I also, when we were at the Galloping Ghost arcade, played a little bit of Metal Slug. It's a series I it's kind of like Shinobi for me. Like, I suck at Shinobi, but I still like it. I still return to it and play it, but it's hard.
Yeah, I agree. This game is very hard, but I always thought that the Metal Slug series started like in, I don't know, 91, and then it was like a Mega Man game where they had every single one back to back to back. The fact that the sequel or the second one came out in 98 is kind of crazy.
It
seems like it's more of like recent, but it really shows you that SNK was still working on 2D games. In Sony continues to roll out third-party mega hits, while Namco still dominates with Tekken 3, which I would consider to be probably one of the highest-grossing arcade games, fighting games. So I would say it's a good month. In March 1998, Sega quietly discontinues the Sega Saturn in North America, and in Japan, Sega finalizes plans for their next console under the codename Katana. I'm not going to read the quote because it has to do with Sega Rally, and we just talked about it. Nintendo, during this time, is prepping for its 1998 software slate, showing off and doing previews for Banjo-Kazooie and Ocarina of Time, which, to be honest with you, I think those two games were like massively hyped. Even if you weren't a Nintendo 64 fan, it was kind of hard to escape the hype behind Ocarina of Time. They put a lot of money and effort and attention to it. Sega on the Sega Saturn actually released Panzer Dragoon Saga, which a lot of people consider one of their best games. But obviously, being released in the same year with other games like Tekken 3, the PlayStation 1 conversion, at least in Japan, or Banjo-Kazooie and Ocarina of Time, and Metal Gear Solid, then Resident Evil 2, kind of easy to see why this would have been overshadowed, because Sega put no money into it, no hype. I think a lot of actual hardcore Sega fans started liking it after the fact that they, after they either found out, or I can't think of too many fans that were day one fans that I know that are Sega fans. Do you?
No, I had no friends that owned Saturns or kept up on Saturn games. For me, it was really just my only connection to the Sega Saturn were the Archie Sonic comics, and like seeing ads and reading the Nights into Dreams adaptation and thinking like, wow, I wish I could play this, but it seems like the console's dead.
This game would have been pretty good if they like restructured it for the Sega Dreamcast, did a little facelift in the adventure and the flying mode.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I kind of wish the Dreamcast, looking back, did what the Switch did with the Wii U, where we just got like a bunch of ports.
Why not?
I think they should have done that. They should have given us like, more of the Virtua Fighter games, maybe. Panzer Dragoon Saga for sure. Burning Rangers. I think at the very least, Panzer Dragoon Saga and Burning Rangers, like ported to the Dreamcast, would have been pretty solid launch titles. But whatever.
Yeah. Outside of this, I mean, I think the Tekken, this is more of the Japanese release, but Tekken 3 was a humongous game on the PlayStation 1, which we'll talk about. I think I have the US release on here, so we'll talk about it then. Let's talk about April 1998. It was kind of a quiet month for Sega since they were prepping up for their internal new challenge presentation that was supposed to debut the Dreamcast in May. So they were busy doing that. On the official Sega Saturn magazine in the UK, they wrote during this time, although the project is only at 40%, the team is very conscious that graphics alone won't assure success when they're talking about the Dreamcast. How do you think that the Dreamcast definitely kind of exceeded that idea that it's more than just graphics?
Oh, 100%. I remember the selling point not only were the graphics and pushing that 128-bit, which is kind of funny looking back.
Right.
But the fact that it was online out of the box, that was huge. And I think now looking back, the sheer library of online games is really, really impressive. I look back at like the Xbox and the PS2, and I see people be like, yeah, if you want the modem, there's only like 3 games, and it's laughable, the fact. And then meanwhile, I'll look back at Dreamcast games and realize there's more online games than I ever realized. Like the other day I was looking at my shelf and I'm like, oh, this game was online? That game was online? It's wild. I even remember the very early Sega Swirl, like playing via email, so
Oh yeah.
the Dreamcast was much more than just graphics. It was a computer, basically a TV computer, which was wild.
Sega at this time was also still making money from Sega Rally 2 in arcades, which was very strong. But in America, Sony continued their weird dominance. I think this is probably their biggest year as a console manufacturer in terms of PlayStation 1 at least, where they released a little game called Gran Turismo, and it exploded in Japan, and it also redefined the racing genre. And kind of, I mean, at this time, Sega was, I mean, for a long time, Sega was known as the racing guys because they had like a gajillion racing games. I would say this put Sony on the map as, at least for this simulation type racing games. I wouldn't say it really is that. I mean, it's still kind of, I mean, it's a PlayStation 1 game. I think it looks great for a PlayStation 1 game. I think it reminds me a lot of like what Ridge Racer later did, or I think, or did during this year or the next year after this.
Yeah.
I prefer Ridge Racer for just the style and aesthetics more than I do Gran Turismo. But did you ever play this game, and what was your thoughts? Do you remember this coming out?
I remember it coming out. I may have played it at a friend's house, but to be quite honest, I wasn't too into the PlayStation just because I didn't own one. I do remember though when Metropolis Street Racer came out, people were like, "This is better than Gran Turismo. This is its own thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's so cool." And so I kind of like got behind that game. I remember buying it, and it seemed so out of like place for my library. Like I was the Sonic guy, I was the Phantasy Star Online guy, and then I'm like, oh, but I gotta get Metropolis Street Racer because it's the Gran Turismo killer. And it kind of, I don't know, it kind of did become that when it became Project Gotham Racing. So, yeah, I mean, it was, Gran Turismo was good, but I feel like it did have some stiff competition. It just took some time. And I also think it meant Sega had to. Sega themselves didn't really compete with Gran Turismo. It was
No.
more third parties coming in on the Dreamcast and showcasing something. I'm glad Sega didn't try to compete with Gran Turismo. It's its own thing. I'm more of an arcade racer guy. That's why I love Sonic Racing Cross Worlds so much, because it really pulls from Sega's arcade racing past. But yeah, I mean, credit where credit is due. Gran Turismo did a lot, but
I think
I was never really a big simulation guy.
I think the closest was probably the Ferrari game that what's his name did for the Dreamcast, where they were like pushing it as like,
Ferrari, yes, Ferrari F355 Challenge from Yu Suzuki. Yeah,
I think that was probably the one. But it was so basic that like it kind of came and went.
So basic.
And
What was it, like 2 cars and like 3 tracks or something?
Pretty much. So it wasn't really like, it was just you a Ferrari fan, which is like 10,000 people. Like how many people could afford a Ferrari, and how many people really like that play video games are like, I guess I'll just play it on the Dreamcast. Like when you buy a Dreamcast game, it's mostly for like, I want to play a really good game that's an arcade style, or it has a lot of content, or the gameplay loop is really, really fun.
True. I also remember, though, once the Dreamcast did come out, they did kind of address that by having games being more budget priced. I remember buying games new for $29.99, and that was the MSRP. And it was because it was just like an arcade port. But it was so impressive at the time, because you're like, oh, I'm buying an arcade game essentially for $30. This is a great deal.
Oh yeah.
And it was a new release game too. It wasn't like nowadays where you're buying the Capcom collection and it's games from 30 years ago. Like, imagine a game hits the arcades and a year later you can buy it for $10 on a disc or $20 on a disc. Like, that's pretty impressive. And they don't do that now. They don't even release arcade games on home consoles, I feel. I see so many out there. What did I see? H2 Overdrive from the former Midway. I don't think that's on consoles, so.
I agree, and we never got that Scarlet Dawn game ported over officially, even though I think there's like a fan person that released it or something. But
and that was 2018. That was a while ago.
Yeah, it's ancient now.
Yeah.
In May of 1998, Sega finally unveiled in May 21st. They announced the new Challenge Conference in Tokyo, which unveiled the Sega Dreamcast that we know. And they also announced they were being partnering up with Microsoft Windows CE, which I remember magazines making a big deal about this, saying like, oh, Sega has the backing of a giant. They're $1 trillion company. And, before the Xbox was a thing. So here's a Wired quote. Windows CE will move beyond set-top and handheld devices and into the hands of Twitch gamers. Did they know we were going to be Twitch, the channel? No, I'm joking. Twitch gamers. I can't believe they've used that phrase to describe gamers all the way since then. In the arcades, though, we had Daytona USA 2, Battle on the Edge, which I would say is another sequel that basically no one kind of talks about or kind of went under the radar from a really popular game. It's this weird year where like they released Sega Rally 2 and then they released this. Do you feel like these games are overshadowed by the original games?
For Daytona,
and Sega Rally 2?
Yeah, I would say yeah for both of them. I mean, it wasn't until just recently in a Yakuza game, right, that we got Daytona USA 2, but they had to call it Sega Racing Classic 2, I think.
So yeah, something like that.
But yeah, not overshadowed, but it's in large part, I think, because in the case of Daytona 2, it never made it to consoles, and in the case of Sega Rally 2, it was an early Dreamcast title that was honestly cool, but not like insanely impressive. it was still a time of transition for Sega. Like, Model 3 stuff was not anywhere near as impressive as what the Dreamcast was truly capable of, and we didn't really truly see that until like Shenmue 2, which was one of the final games released for it, at least one of the final like major games.
I agree. I think it's a weird year because I feel like they both racing games were like they probably still made a ton of money. I just don't hear a lot of people talking about like, oh man, every time I see Daytona, it's always the original, like the song, everything, the menu, the way the camera moves in the beginning. It's always that when they promote
Right.
Daytona. But yeah,
Right.
June.
And Daytona's not a franchise. It's really just like a single game to a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree. So that's why I'm like, oh yeah, Daytona 2 was a thing. I forget. June 1998, Sega released another sequel game that I don't know if this one's ever overshadowed. I don't think a lot of people even know the game that much. Fighting Vipers 2 launched on the Model 3 arcade. Definitely an upgrade in at least looks.
Yeah.
And the internal dev teams began porting arcade engines for the Dreamcast, which became Naomi basically, and they made it easy for everyone to be able to move from one to another. Famitsu Weekly talks about Fighting Vipers 2. They said, Fighting Vipers 2 is a fast, smooth, and technically brilliant, a perfect showcase of Sega Models 3 hardware. And the Model 3 hardware is kind of a weird one, for me at least. I know that Model 2 was very iconic for me, maybe because of all the Saturn ports, and then some of those arcade games were like so popular in the United States. They say this is like a standout for the hardware. What do you think is like the showcase for you on the Model 3?
I mean, I'd have to agree. I did import Fighting Vipers 2, or I think I might have bought it at a video game convention very early in the 2000s. And it's an impressive game. It's just a shame, and I think this is kind of a running theme with Sega in 1998, is they were making a lot of arcade sequels to great games that never truly overshadowed the original, which is kind of odd because Sega sequels typically do overshadow the original. Think of Sonic 2, Virtua Fighter 2, what else is there? Phantasy Star 2,
Shinobi or Revenge of Shinobi?
Streets of Rage 2, Revenge of Shinobi. Yeah, so like Sega has a long history of the sequels outshining the originals, and then here in 1998 we're getting Sega Rally 2, Daytona USA 2, Fighting Vipers 2. None of them truly overshadowed the original, and none of them truly are standout Dreamcast releases. In fact, I think a lot of people will forget about Fighting Vipers 2 just because Sega never localized it, which I thought was a mistake. So yeah, it's interesting that Sega, not only was the Saturn on the way out, but I feel like even though Model 3 was still relevant, it was also on the way out because they did not truly prioritize porting all of those games. Like Daytona 2 didn't make it over at all. Fighting Vipers 2 didn't make it over to the States or the West in general, I don't think. And yeah, it's interesting that Famitsu was raving about it in June, but Sega themselves were like, let's move on.
It's crazy. And the probably the biggest game this month, at least in Japanese arcades, was ending the month of June, was Street Fighter Alpha 3. I'm pretty sure this is a game that everyone's played. It's probably close to one of the most ported games. I know there was a really good Dreamcast release. There was a PlayStation 1 release. I think there might have, maybe it's just Alpha 1, but Super Nintendo was getting the early alpha games. It's crazy. They look horrible, but they were released. What's your thoughts on Street Fighter Alpha 3? Do you like that game? Because I really like the aesthetics of that game and like the anime look. When I was a kid, I was like, oh my god, this is so awesome.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know if I own that one. It might have been on my wish list for a very long time. Let me see. I can actually check my library. So let's see. Platforms, Dreamcast. I have 215 Dreamcast games. Street Fighter. I could look over there, but I'd have to run away from
The
Yeah, I
screen.
don't think I own that one. I don't think I own any Street Fighter games for Dreamcast. That's kind of surprising, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
I I mean, it's one of those games that's been ported so much that when the Dreamcast came out, I think nobody really cared. They're like, "Oh, that game? All right, yeah, I played it on everything." There was even a Game Boy Advance port. So if you, yeah, I like that game. It's a good game. So people say it's a little broken and they like 2 better, but I'm not playing professionally and it's a fun game to play. So
Hmm.
So let's go into July. In July,
Yeah.
Summer Arcade, Virtual Striker version, Virtual Striker 2 version 98 hits Japanese arcades. I remember seeing one of these games before, like randomly in an arcade. I think it wasn't even here; it might have been in Mexico or something. They just had it playing.
Hmm.
I thought it was incredible that they got it to be 3D because all the games I remember in this era were still kind of 2D. Like Madden 98 on the Saturn and PlayStation 1 is still, I think, this like fake 2D 3D look. So Sega having a full soccer game that's 3D, it's kind of impressive. They finalized the manufacturing of the Sega Dreamcast. Uh, the competition was probably the biggest thing during this era. Nintendo releases Banjo-Kazooie on July 17th in the United States, which becomes a massive hit for the Nintendo 64. And SNK in arcade releases probably their most popular game, King of Fighters 98, and it becomes a fighting, a legendary fighting game. I think it's probably everywhere. Outside of these 3 games, which one do you think is the most? Well, I wouldn't say Virtual Striker. Out of these 2 games,
Hmm.
did you play either of these games? I'm sure you played 98, right?
I played Banjo Kazooie, I believe, at a friend's house very briefly at the time. But yeah, King of Fighters, I owned. In fact, when I bought my Japanese Dreamcast in the mid 2000s off eBay, it came with Res and it came with King of Fighters 99 Japanese versions. And it was just recently, I think, I bought King of Fighters 98, which is also called King of Fighters 99 on Dreamcast, which gets a little confusing,
Yeah.
right? But that I picked it up because it was one of the few games that has Neo Geo Pocket Color support, and I for the longest time I had a Neo Geo Pocket Color Dreamcast link cable on my watch list, and it popped up, and I think I got it for like $40, which is a really good price for that cable. Like a lot of people sell it for like $100. And it's just a little fun curiosity, but it is, I get a real kick out of connecting the Neo Geo to the Dreamcast and like having something happen. So yeah, I do own that game. I have actually played it recently. I forgot what the unlocks are, but I think they're pretty pathetic.
Oh.
But it's still cool. But speaking of Virtua Striker 2, like again, another sequel, another
Yeah.
Model 3, I believe, game.
Yeah.
And it's a game I don't own, and I was just looking at it on eBay. American version, $30, whatever. Japanese version, like $4. I'm actually kind of surprised I didn't buy it when I was in Japan, because it seems like the type of game that would be at every single store for like $4. And I mean, or maybe less, because considering when I was in Japan, the best deal I got was Last Bronx for $4.
Dang.
So yeah, so when you consider like a really solid Model 3 fighting game or Model 2 fighting game goes for that much, I'd have to imagine a game people are trying to sell on eBay for $4 was probably, maybe it was free.
Yeah, they give it to you,
But-
like, they give the tissues out for
Yeah, but
Yakuza.
I feel like we need to do Virtua Striker on a future Sega Talk, because it's a game I've never played, and I've never gotten into, and I've never really learned about or talked about. But it's a Virtua game,
Yeah.
you know? It's part of that Virtua franchise, or I don't know what you call it. Cop, striker, fighter, racing.
The virtual video game universe.
Yeah, we need a new Virtua. Wouldn't that be wild if Sega announced a new Virtua outside of Virtua Fighter?
That would be interesting. I hope it's I think they just need to do a Virtual Cop collection, or maybe just a light gun collection, and I'll be happy
Yeah.
with that. But the August 1998 was the calm before the storm. The Dreamcast production was ramping up in Japan. They were releasing promotional materials. In the arcade division, they were just prepping up for the fall release of The Ocean Hunter, which is probably an arcade game that most people that know ports probably never heard of if you don't pay attention to arcade games. Wired says in their November issue about their August earning call, Sega says it is counting on its new 128-bit internet-capable game player Dreamcast to leapfrog ahead of the competitors, that the game player that the kids are playing.
Right.
Sony releases Parasite Eve, which is I don't know if that game is very popular with a lot of people. Or at least you knew. I know you weren't into PlayStation 1, but did you ever do you remember it at least in store shelves because it had like the blonde girl that I guess it kind of stood out in a way?
Yeah, I 100% remember the cover art, and I feel like I remember it so well that I'm like that I own it, but I guess maybe I do, maybe I don't. I feel like I own more PlayStation games than I've actually like
played,
cataloged. But yeah, I for some reason that game really sticks out to me. I might own it. I'll have to check after we record. But you mentioned Ocean Hunter. That was in Pirate Yakuza, wasn't it?
Yep. It was.
Yeah.
So they did get a port recently. I was just saying I guess you're right. It wasn't. I totally forgot. That game I just played straight through. It was so short that I totally forgot that they did have original arcade games. Outside of Parasite Eve, this was always a game that I remember seeing in store shelves, and I always thought it would be, for me. I actually never got to play it because it was always so expensive, that at least from what I remember. And then and then it was just randomly gone. But I remember it having a ton of advertisements everywhere and being pretty hyped from Namco. And I thought it was interesting that an RPG, I think it was Namco, that they did this game, and they were an RPG company. Thought it was kind of interesting. But in September of 1998, Sega released officially Ocean Hunter. I don't know how well the game did or didn't do for them. They went to the European trade show featuring the Dreamcast and previewed some Western developers. Sony in Japan releases Metal Gear Solid, which becomes a cultural phenomenon for Namco. Or not Namco, but Konami. Nintendo keeps the hype cycle for Ocarina of Time alive. And SNK and Capcom were both dominating globally the arcade genre because of their fighting games. So we also got on PlayStation 1 during the same time in the United States on September 9th, Spyro the Dragon, which was designed by a ex-Sega, Sega Technical Studio, ex-employee. Did you care about Spyro the Dragon? Because I thought that the design was a little too like Nickelodeon, for me.
Oh, I was aware of Spyro, but I feel like at this time there were so many games coming out that seemed like animal platformers between Gex and Spyro and Crash Bandicoot, and there were so many that it was hard to know which ones were good and which ones were bad. Yeah. And especially when you weren't a PlayStation 1 owner, you just kind of see them coming out and you're like, I guess they're all great because everyone's talking about them, and then you look back and you're like, oh, Gex was bad.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, oh, Spyro. I don't know if Spyro was good, but then you hear about ones where people are like, oh, what's the one, the Thievius Raccoonus? Which one's that?
This which one?
Um,
TV's right.
the one with the
Oh,
raccoon.
Sly.
Yeah, but then I hear people are like, oh, Sly Cooper's great. You know,
Yeah.
Dax and Jackster is great. So yeah, I guess I just wasn't keeping up on the game reviews because yeah,
This
I
is
don't know.
one.
Is Spyro good?
So I didn't. I tried to get into it on the when I got it a long time ago after it came out, and I think it was
Hmm.
just like you have to go here and go back, go here, go back, and all this and unlock and find. I kind of gave up and moved on. But then when they released the remake, I was like, man, maybe I should try to beat it on this new remake. I got it for free, or like it came in a bundle that I bought. So I did
Yeah.
actually beat it, and it's pretty good for a PlayStation game. I like it kept the controls intact and stuff. Obviously, it has way more changes, and the graphics look better. But it's
Yeah.
it's an interesting game at the time because it's trying to do the 3D that kind of Banjo Kazooie did for the Nintendo 64, but on a PlayStation that I think it wasn't technically ever. Because I mean, if you remember Crash Bandicoot, it was obviously on rails. You have the camera behind you. This one lets you run
Right.
around. So it was interesting in that way that you could go anywhere you want. But yeah, I thought it.
Right, and it was hard to know too in the advertising what type of game it was, if it was more like an open exploration one or if it was more like straight ahead, not so much on rails, but like narrow pathway like KO the Kangaroo. Remember that
Yeah,
one that came out
yeah,
on Dreamcast as well, and that one was more of a Crash Bandicoot copycat, whereas it seems like Spyro was trying to be more like what Banjo Kazooie or something. But
yeah.
it was hard to know which ones were good and which ones were bad. And unfortunately for the Dreamcast, I feel like any of the ones that did make their way over were kind of forgettable. You know, like Super Magnetic Neo, KO the Kangaroo, like. But then Rayman 2 is probably one of the greatest 3D action platformers out there. I even at one time placed it ahead of Sonic Adventure. I thought it was just such an amazing, solid game. Um,
What's
so
your?
yeah.
I was gonna ask, what's your opinion on the Ocean Hunter, and it not getting a actual port during the era? It didn't get a Dreamcast port, obviously.
Yeah, this era was really interesting because it seems like once went into the Naomi era, just about all those games were getting ported to the Dreamcast. There were very few that didn't, and Ocean Hunter, Fighting Vipers 2. It just seemed like they reached a point where they left these certain games in the past, and they were really looking forward. And maybe Ocean Hunter 2 just lacks like anything that really stands out as being a console title. I feel like it's maybe one of those games that just works better in the arcade. Um, and I'll have to revisit it in Pirate Yakuza. I only played it once, but it 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 definitely I feel like is one of those games like Brave Firefighters that makes more sense in an arcade than at home. I kind of felt that way when Sega eventually did that Wii 2-pack with LA Machine Guns
Oh
and
yeah,
what was the other one?
LA Machine Guns in New York, Gunblade.
Gunblade New York.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and I feel like those games like Ocean Hunter really lack like a main character and a gripping story, and they're playable at home, but they just don't have the impact that like a Virtua Cop does or something, where you can see who the main characters are, and I don't know. But having said all that, I had an absolute blast playing uh, what was it, Ghost Squad
Oh
recently,
yeah,
and I'm like, man, this game is so much better than I remember. Ghost Squad and Operation Ghost, I absolutely love those games, and yeah. So who am I to talk? Maybe their Ocean Hunter is like an amazing game, and it should have had a home console release. But I think just at this time they still were. The Dreamcast obviously was in its infancy, and I think it wasn't until '99 that Sega was really like, oh yeah, let's do F355, and let's do Crazy Taxi, and let's do what's the big one? or not big one, but 18-wheeler, and these will be like cheap games. Like I still think at the time they were thinking, anything we port over to this are going to have to be like meaty titles with enough content to really make them. Yeah, exactly. And I think Ocean Hunter just lacked that. It was really a small game that they probably couldn't really expand upon and have like a Dreamcast mode or something.
Kind of sad because I was pretty into the like releases on the Dreamcast. I really liked House of the Dead 2, and I felt like they could have done a little more with it. They even did a gun in Japan, at least, and a lot of third-party guns in America. In October 1998, it was basically the year of passing the torch. Definitely in Japan, they got marketing blitz with the president of Sega making these wannabe Sega Segatan Sanshiro commercials. He was basically passing on the Saturn to these commercials, which a lot of people find mediocre. They also released late in the year Daytona 2, which we already talked about. But here's a official Sega Saturn Magazine UK October 1998 quote. The Saturn is being put to rest quickly, just as games were starting to tap into its potential, but the Dreamcast held many wonderful promises for the future. Do you think that the Sega Saturn had enough, I guess, juice left in it to continue being ahead of the crowd? Like, you think they could have released some Metal Gear Solid type game on the Dreamcast to sell copies randomly by the end of it?
For the Saturn? No, yeah. I don't think the Saturn had much more to it. It unfortunately seemed like the right time to put it to rest. I just can't imagine a time when it's like 99 and we're still getting like must-own Saturn titles, and it's like, why isn't this on Dreamcast? Yeah, unfortunately. And I'm a Saturn fan, but you look at my Saturn library and it's minuscule compared to
your Dreamcast.
What the Dreamcast offers. Yeah.
Also on the Nintendo 64, they released F-Zero X, which F-Zero to me, even when I was a kid, it kind of was like, surprised this is not a Sega game. It has like this rock and roll music to it, futuristic graphics. You're going high speed down this. I was into the Super Nintendo one. I thought it was really cool. I like the music in it. I've never played X on the Nintendo 64, so I really don't have much to add to it. And I don't think you played F-Zero X, right?
No.
It's very. I never hear anyone talk about the F-Zero X game on the Nintendo 64. It feels like you hear about Banjo-Kazooie, you hear about all these other games, but never about the poor F-Zero GX. In November 1998, the Dreamcast arrives, literally from a few months, maybe 4 or 5 months of an announcement to, oh yeah, we're just making it, to release like in less than a year.
Yeah.
Japan got the console on November 27th, 1998, and I think, I'm not even 100% sure, but this is probably the first time I heard like people actually saying, oh, I can't wait for another year for this. I have to import this Dreamcast. There was, in my opinion, probably a lot of imported Dreamcasts from people that did not want to wait for the U.S. release. And it probably was fine because I think it played all the games. Mostly, I think the launch one, I think later on they like modded it or something, or they changed something to make it not play American games. I'm not sure how that worked, but I do know there was the burnt disc that let you boot them.
Yeah,
I do know that.
Yeah, my Dreamcast right back there is actually a modded one. It was probably from someone who imported a Japanese launch model and got a chip in it. I've told the story before on here, but I bought that off eBay, and I have a I don't know what they call it, DCX, I think, boot disk, and I would use that every single time. I'd use my boot disk. And then one day I just forgot to use it, and the game started just fine. I'm like, oh, what the hell? I guess this thing has a mod chip, and they didn't sell it. They didn't list it on eBay as having a mod chip. So that was my happy accident to have a launch model Dreamcast with a mod chip. It's like the best thing to have. But yeah, it's I don't blame people for importing it. It was a very exciting. I think it was Sega's mistake. I think as much as I love 99.99, they should have done a global release.
Day one.
I don't know why they didn't. I think Dreamcast should have come out in America in '98, even if it meant a smaller launch lineup. It would have been epic. And the mere fact that the Sonic Adventure was in stores for so long is wild to me. Like, it existed for nearly a year before we actually played it is so weird now. Like, imagine if Sonic Frontiers came out and we're like, oh, you can't play that for 9 months. You know?
To me, it feels like the conception of the Dreamcast, the development of the hardware, and the actual release in Japan was shorter than the delay to the United States. Like, it was a whole year they delayed it. I agree. But I would have preferred if they worked on it and perfected it for $99.99 just to have the date, but have it be a global launch and have a whole year of them slowly like showing off these tech demos the way Sony does, where they're like, oh, look, this old man, you could play this old man in the game, and you really don't play the old man. And yeah, that would have been, I think, pretty epic. They kind of rushed in because they wanted to keep the Sega Saturn fan base basically and as quickly as possible to transition over, which they didn't. So I could see it in their point of view. So another arcade game that came out on the Model 3 that never got a Dreamcast port was Spike Out, created by the Toshihiro Nagoshi, who made a little game called Yakuza, which obviously started here with this title in the arcades. But here's Wire's quote from the era from this month about the Dreamcast in November 1998. The profits may be off 76%, but the game maker sees its new 128-bit Dreamcast machine turning things around. Nintendo finally releases a little game called The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time just in time for the holidays. And Sony continues its record-setting PlayStation 1 sales because of the mania around Metal Gear Solid. So it's a big month for the holidays, at least in Japan.
Huge.
At least in Japan. In America, dominated by PlayStation 1 sales and Zelda fans talking about the best game ever created. Were you impressed by The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, at least graphically, or just passerby as a gamer?
It honestly, it looked like more of the same N64 Zelda to me. I don't know. It never really wowed me. I thought it looked interesting and kind of haunting and creepy, if anything. But I kind of looked at, especially once we started seeing what the Dreamcast was capable of, I started looking at stuff from the PlayStation and N64 with a little like snootiness. I would be like, look at these blocky graphics. Like, this is not a video game that I'm going to play. And so it's funny. Around this time, I was really kind of turning my nose up even at good titles, just because I was like, and it wasn't until like the Dreamcast comes out and I'm seeing Bleemcast. Remember Bleem? Oh yeah. And I'm like, oh, finally they're making a version of Metal Gear Solid that's playable, because it has the Dreamcast upgrades, And speaking of Spike Out, like, yet another game that Sega Model 3 title that is a hit in arcades that Sega just leaves in the past. It's such a shame that they actually left so many great arcade titles in arcades, and I'm honestly also surprised Spike Out never made it to the Yakuza games. I mean, there's still time. I feel like that has to happen.
I think they did do it on one game. I forgot which one, though. I think they
did.
Is it? Yeah.
Here,
oh, man.
Let me see.
All my windows closed. Great. But, yeah. Pretty sure it is in one of them.
Which one?
I don't remember.
Is it?
Spike Out Dream. Just put it on.
It's in Infinite Wealth, and that's the
Okay.
one game I haven't played yet. That's why.
Um,
But Spike Out Battle Street, I will say, is a game that I kept intending to buy, and I feel like the price kept going up, unfortunately. And then my Xbox has died on me. It's now dead, unfortunately.
oh,
It was dying over the years. It was the clock capacitor, I think, finally killed the console, unfortunately. But yeah, I was playing my Xbox on and off, and then I think a few years ago, it completely died. And I took it apart yesterday, and I looked inside, and it's no more. Very sad. But yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because like, should Sega have either delayed the Dreamcast launch to a $99.99 global release, or should they have released it worldwide and then drip fed these games out? And I don't know what the answer is, but I don't know. I feel like it's such a shame that they left so many Model 3 games on the table. And I know we haven't completed this episode yet, but I feel like that's kind of the theme
from this.
of 1998. Yeah, is that it's like Sega's releasing so many cool and sometimes obscure arcade titles, and they never make it to consoles, and so they just kind of like sit there. But what's so interesting is that it's like now that we're seeing Spike Out and Ocean Hunter and Daytona 2 all on the Yakuza games, and I think Sega's really, as cool as those are, I have absolutely no idea, and maybe they'll do it soon. I have absolutely no idea why they have not made, RGG has not made a compilation, even if it's digital only, where it's like a Sega arcade with all of these titles that you can play without it being in a Yakuza game. You know what I mean? I don't know why they haven't done that. It's so strange. Like they tell M2 to take a hike, and they stop doing the Sega classics, or the Sega Ages, and yet they let people at RGG Studio throw a free game in, and it just kind of is like an afterthought. I don't know. It's such a strange business decision. I don't know why they haven't done this, and maybe they will, but it seems like a Model 3 collection is a no-brainer. I don't know why they haven't done it.
I wonder how. Maybe they just thought it was less popular than the Model 2, or maybe it's more complicated to port. I will say that it's crazy that we got Zombie Revenge, which is kind of like Spike Out. It's like a beat 'em up 3D game.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
And I felt like, why not release this? Why not? And we got what is it? Confidential Mission, I think, which on Dreamcast, at least in the UK.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes it's like
the US got it, but
oh.
the US got Confidential Mission, but it does not work with the Japanese light gun. Remember that? The American version, because of Columbine.
Right. Man, why did they ruin everything?
I don't know why that was such a strange decision, though. Like, let's release the shooting game, but let's tell people that the imported gun they have does not work with it. Let's lock out our own hardware.
It's dumb.
But you can use the Mad Cat's gun. So it's like, what? I don't know. Weird decisions.
Now we're going on to the last month of
all right
1998. Early Dreamcast titles like Virtual Fighter 3TB and Pin Try It. How do you even say this title? Trilycia?
Pen Triicelon.
Triicelon. Such a weird. Okay. Sell briskly in Japan. Hardware shortages plague the launch, which is, I mean, I think at the time I remember everyone telling me that they've always thought these like, oh, they sold out, were kind of fake stories that they created to create hype. That it's like a sought after item. I don't know if it's true. Do you think they made up these, like, did they do shortages on purpose to like hype up people, like maybe you won't get it this holiday season if you don't get it today?
I feel like considering the turnaround for the Dreamcast from announcement to release, I
probably
think they were
true.
just struggling to catch up with demand, you know?
The game I have here in the background is Virtual Fighter 3TB. Actually, this is the arcade version of it, not the 3TB. Um, what is your opinion on this game? I think this is like one of those like, I don't even know how to say it. There's some people that love this game, and there's some people that absolutely hated it. I know at the time of release, it was not as hyped as Virtual Fighter 2, and I would say some of the
Right.
uniqueness is they added another button, and they also had you go up and down. You know, there's an actual leveling on
Was
the
it
levels.
grab? What was the button they added?
I think it was grab because I think before you had to press punch and kick together, right?
I think so. Yeah, you know,
Or is it dodge?
again with the Model 3, maybe it's dodge, but again with the Model 3 talk, Virtual Fighter 3 TB seemed like kind of old by then, and the fact that it was a launch title both I think in Japan and in America and in Europe, maybe it was a launch title in all regions. I mean, it's good to have Virtua Fighter. It's a great game, but it definitely was old by this point. And yeah, I'm glad it got ported though. Like out of all of these games that weren't getting ported, you're gonna have to port Virtua Fighter 3 TV. Though it is interesting because I feel like Virtua Fighter 3 in general is kind of the forgotten game. It seems like it's the least like out of I don't know how many revisions it has, but it just doesn't seem like every revision is available on home consoles. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm wrong. Was Virtua Fighter 3 given an Xbox Live Arcade release, or am I thinking of 2?
2.
2, yeah. So like 3TB just seems like it's the least ported, the least readily available, and the least talked about. It seems like Virtua Fighter 2 and 4 and 5 are the ones that get a lot of play.
Right.
1 is more of like a historical like
Relic.
interest, you know, like it's on the like it's on the Astro City Mini. It did get the remix version, but it's not readily available. I don't think. Is it a Sega Ages title? I don't
Nope.
think it is.
It's not.
So yeah, so it's like 2 and 4 and 5 are the ones you can find everywhere. But
I think it was on a Yakuza game,
Yeah.
so it's got that to join the other obscure games.
that might be it. Yeah, 3 is 3 on a Yakuza game.
I think it is, and I know 5 was too. So let me see. Yakuza.
Yeah.
I thought it was. It's kind of hard to keep track because they do so many.
It was in
Yeah, like a
dragon pirate. Infinite Wealth and Pirate Yakuza, but I don't know which version it was. Maybe it
interesting.
was the original. Maybe it's the non 3. Maybe that I think I remember it. It was like the. No, it is TB. We're gonna have to do a Virtua Fighter 3 Sega talk because it's such a strange game to me. It's one that like again, it's the theme of 1998 is games that either got ports or didn't get ports until RGG Studio got around to it like a year ago.
It's like we wanted to
You
do
know,
this.
It's so funny.
We wanted to do this, but we had to work on Shenmue, so we had no time to port titles over.
Yeah,
I-
and you have here more arcade titles.
Yeah. I have a few. Yeah. I was gonna say about this month. It was that it had Dirt Devils and Harley Davidson and LA Riders, which is two games that I didn't even know were Sega games. I do know the Harley one because I've seen it before, and I'm like, what is that? Is it a Sega game? Right. It is, right?
It is, yeah. I've seen it. I've seen it a few times. Dirt Devils, I don't think I've ever seen. I know it's a vacuum cleaner, but yeah, it's an AM3 game that is very seldom talked about. it looks cool, and again, I feel like we're gonna probably get it in a Yakuza
game
eventually.
if they could get the license for it, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy to me that these also obviously did not get ported to Dreamcast, so they had people working on these arcade license games. I don't know how well a Harley Davidson game would have done on the Dreamcast. But they did release a trucking game. I really liked the graphics on that game because it came in a Dreamcast. You got the demo, and I think it was addictive. Maybe if the gameplay loop.
Oh, are you talking
good,
about 18-wheeler?
Yeah, I mean, normally
I love 18-wheeler. I'm Lizard Tail, and I own this road, Greenhorn.
Exactly.
Move.
And if it
that's how I was driving the other day.
And if it wasn't for the demo, I probably would never have picked up an 18-wheeler game. It looks almost like one of those like pool games that you see back in the early 2000s, like before you go pay out in Target, they would sell those cheap games like the M&M ones.
I thought it was so weird that got a PS2 port. Like, it's such a small game. It's such a tiny game. It might as well be a mini game, and yet they're like pressing it to DVD for the PlayStation 2.
They had a whole team working
Ridiculous.
on it. It's crazy.
That demo too is the equivalent of going to the arcade and like popping in a quarter and getting to play it once. It's actually quite a meaty demo, which is kind of funny.
It is. You don't have to even buy the game; just play the demo. As for Virtual Fighter, I think it also what didn't help is that in the United States, one of the launch titles was Soul Calibur, which was considered one of the most meatiest, technically advanced fighting games that people have ever seen at home. And it totally
Dead or
overshadowed.
Alive 2 came out not too long ago, or not too long after. And that game's amazing too. Yeah.
So during the holidays, Sony dominated globally. I think this is when it was basically Sony's the top dog and everyone knows it. Nintendo Zelda had a universal acclaim. Everyone considered it a perfect game. And Namco's Tekken 3 port continued to sell gajillions of copies. The PlayStation 1 port I thought was super impressive for a PlayStation 1 game. It's probably the best looking PlayStation 1 game. It also had a volleyball mode, a beat 'em up mode. I wish more fighting games today added extra modes the way that game did. Virtual Fighter could have learned a little bit about just adding more content because 3TB was just kind of like an arcade port. Not a lot of thought after that was put into it the way Soul Calibur was. But that was Sega in 1998. As Barry said it justifiably, it was mostly about Model 3 arcade games that never got to see console success or given a console chance to succeed. A lot of sequels that were overshadowed by the original games. And a lot of racing games, a couple of fighting games that got overshadowed also by the originals. Some games that we never got to see, like Ocean Hunter, at least at the time, and Dreamcast era. Dirt Devils and Harley Davidson and LA Riders. What is your closing thoughts about this era?
Well, man, before we get to the Patreon memories, my closing thoughts really are that it's a very important era, but it's also an incredibly forgettable one. It's very interesting. Yeah. It's like we weren't getting any more Genesis games. We weren't getting any more Master System games. The Game Gear was gone. The Saturn was being put to rest. So really it was like every single Sega console is dead or dying or being put down in 1998, but the Dreamcast is coming out soon. And so it's like it's a very big year of transition. It's also a very big year for arcades, but like you mentioned, a lot of it remained in arcades. So it's really, we have to rely on our memories or hopefully seeing some of these games at places like Galloping Ghost or a bowling alley, in 2025. Yeah. But I really think RGG Studio kind of saved 1998 in the last few years with all the ports they've been doing. And I would not be shocked if Dirt Devils or LA Riders end up appearing in, like a Dragon 9 or 10 or wherever they get to. But yeah, I want to say thank you to Michael S. for picking this one, because it is interesting to run through a year. And I'd like to do this again. I actually think there's some very interesting years in the 2010s. One that jumps out to me is the one where we talked about remember we always end the year talking about our favorite games of the year, and our favorites were like the Taxman iOS releases of Sonic 1 and 2. Like, that's how sad of a year it was.
Yeah.
So I'd really like to cover that year, because I think doing every year would be quite a chore, but I think doing those years that are very like weird, bad, or awkward for Sega are interesting, because it's kind of like they're years we kind of brush off and move on from. And it's interesting to look back and be like, well, why was that year forgettable? Or what was going on that we just don't talk about anymore? So yeah, 1998, weird, transitional, forgettable, but also very important, which is a strange thing.
Right.
And speaking of Michael S., here's his memories. So if you support us on Patreon, you can have your memories read at the end of the show. So Michael S. says, 1998, I had a PlayStation, and I had very little experience with Sega other than a neighbor who had a Genesis. My friend's brother had a Sega Saturn, but we all thought it was really bad, since he only had a triple pack of games, and these were all very old and dated by 1998. It was also probably playing a lot of Quake Online, tying up the phone line. Alex H. says, well, 1998 was before I got into Sonic and even knew what Sega was, but I do recall going to a fun zone type place called Kids Kingdom in Ann Arbor, which had some Sega machines. I recall playing Daytona USA and Rail Chase 2. The only other video game memory I have was playing Moto Racer on the PC. Shame that never got a Dreamcast port, which I still cherish to this day as the first game I ever played. I don't recall any pop culture events that happened at the time, since I was quite young. Ben H. says, well, I was still playing Master System. Little did I know I was still getting new games somewhere on the other side of the world. I also recall playing PC games at this time, because I distinctly remember having a JPG setup of the Star Wars poster with US political figures titled Star Wars, poking fun at the year's events in the White House. Oh, Kenneth Starr, I get it. Nicholas S. says 1998 was also when I got my first Genesis. I was 13 and my parents couldn't afford video games, but I started mowing lawns. I got a Genesis at the yard sale, buy games every week, as they were only $5 each at a local used game store. I fell in love with Sega. The local grocery store started carrying Archie Sonic comics, and I started collecting all of those. And then I saw a Dreamcast demo with Sonic Adventure in Toys R Us that blew my mind. I was watching the Sonic cartoons on repeat. This was the year when Sonic and Sega took over my mind. And finally, we have Daniel Andres, who unfortunately does not open his comic with saying, oh my gosh. I always like when he does that. But he says, I'm going to say he said it anyway, oh my gosh. 1998 was the first year that I ever got to play a Sega Genesis. I was 4 years old. That's where it all started for me. Yeah, we didn't say, how old were you in 1998? Let's be real, George. Let's get it out there. What were you?
I don't remember. I can't do math. Let me see. So, in 98, so that was 12, 11?
Okay, and I was 13. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it was, I thought it was, I don't know, younger? I don't remember. I don't know. It's kind of hard. 98 is such a weird year, because I do remember high school, and I think that was 2000, so yeah. So 12, yeah.
Yeah, I was watching PG-13 movies, I guess.
I wasn't allowed to. I was just glancing them from the, hopefully one day I was like, oh, one more.
One more year, and then I can officially watch them. Yeah, the next episode of Sega Talk is going to be exciting, because as I mentioned somewhere in the show, Sonic Racing Cross Worlds is out there. We're going to go all the way back and talk about Sonic Drift and Sonic Drift 2 for the Game Gear. I'm very excited for that, because it's a game duo that I've always enjoyed, and I just recently picked up the actual cartridge for Sonic Drift 1. So we'll be talking about Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Eggman, Fang, and Metal Sonic and all of their racing adventures on the next Sega Talk. So thanks for watching. George, close us out.
Bye.
There you go.